The LA Kings look to bounce back in Game 2 of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and Austin Stanovich of the Hockey News joins us to talk about it on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we are on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. Also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, it is the LA Kings against the Oilers in Game 2 of the Stanley Cup playoffs coming up tonight. LA down 1-0 after falling 7-4 in game number 1. What has to happen tonight for the Kings to come home with a split? Joining us to discuss that and more is friend of the show, Austin Stanovich, who covers the LA Kings for the Hockey News, and you can follow him on X and Twitter. He is at @Stanovich68. Hey, Austin, thanks for your time today. How are you?
Anytime, Eddie. I'm doing fantastic. It's playoff hockey time. It's, in my opinion, the best time of the year, so definitely doing good.
Totally agree with that, and looking forward to seeing you out there, hopefully at the Crypt there for game number 2. Get to see some hockey in person as well. Always fun. Before we get into game 2 and beyond, let's take a quick look back at game 1, where the Kings were unfortunately totally outclassed. Connor McDavid put on a show. The Oilers, once they got that 3-0 lead, I know I never felt the Kings had a real chance to win that game despite scoring some goals. How surprised were you, or maybe what were some of the things in particular that surprised you when it comes to the LA Kings about game 1?
Yeah, I'm not sure if anything necessarily surprised me about game 1. I kind of highlighted before the game, the key for this Kings team is going to be kind of weathering that early storm that Edmonton was going to come out with. They had the home crowd behind them. They're going to be fired up for a third series against the Kings. They have all that confidence. This is a year for them where they really, it's another cup or bust year. You knew McDavid was going to have that extra little bit of juice going into the playoff series. So to me, I had a feeling that if the Kings couldn't survive, maybe even the whole first period, even or with a lead, it was going to be a tough night for them. And as soon as Edmonton got that first goal, that to me was a sign of how the night was going to go, especially the way they dominated that first, whatever it was, 10 minutes before they got that opener. And once the Kings go down, we've seen this time and time again, they're an excellent, excellent team at holding a lead with the system they play. When they're trying to chase the game, though, it's a completely different ball game. Like, they just they don't have the system. They don't have I don't want to say they don't have the talent, because I think that's unfair to a lot of the very skilled players in the Kings, but they just don't have the foundation to really chase games, especially against a team like Edmonton that's going to be able to take advantage of teams that are chasing offense and then really punish them in transition and off the rush, which is exactly what happened, right? Like, Jim Hiller even said after the game, they did a terrible job defending the rush and defending transitions, and that's what happens when this Kings team goes down. They do not play well from behind. So from that perspective, I don't think a ton surprised me. The penalty kill is the one thing that maybe did, because the Kings' penalty kills look so good this year, and they kind of dropped an egg in game 1. But even that, I struggle to say I'm surprised that the Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Zach Hyman, Evan Bouchard led Edmonton Oilers power play was as effective as they were, right? Like, it's not shocking that a team with that much talent in the power play, who's been so good with the man advantage over the last few seasons, dominated even as good as the Kings' penalty kill has been. So I don't know if surprise from that game is the right word for me. I know a lot of Kings fans were disappointed. I think that's fair, because I don't think the Kings played their best game at all.
Connor McDavid, you mentioned him, and we've known that he is amazing, but it seems like he's been amazing in a different way this season. 100 assists, which is a career high, and something that before he did it, only 3 other players had done it, and they're all Mount Rushmore type players, Gretzky, Lemieux, and he had 5 assists in game 1. Seems pretty clear that maybe he came to the realization that no matter how great he is individually, he, and even with Leon Draisaitl, those 2 guys alone can't win a cup. It's got to be more of a team effort, and it looks like he's made a concerted effort to make his teammates better. Certainly Zach Hyman has benefited from that in a huge way. Do the Kings need to play Connor McDavid differently than maybe they've played him over the past couple of meetings?
I don't think there's a way for you to change what you're doing that's going to lead to defending Connor McDavid that much better. Like, I think the Kings have proved in the regular season that they can do well against Connor McDavid. You know, the way they clog the neutral zone, they really get stodgy with their 1-3-1. But Edmonton in the last couple of years has kind of figured out, you know, if you sit back and let Connor McDavid swing low, pick up a ton of speed, and attack that neutral zone trap with speed, he can break through it. I think the answer is one of two things. You either have to get more aggressive in stopping that kind of that pipeline to get McDavid the puck, which is what some teams try and do. You don't let Evan Bouchard or Darnell Nurse or whatever it is kind of just sit back and wait for that opening for Connor McDavid to hit. Or you have a Cale Makar level defenseman who can skate with him backwards, but that is a very difficult thing to do because there's only maybe 2 or 3 guys in the league that can do it. So for the Kings, I think, honestly, the only thing they can do is just commit to their game. Like, I don't think at this point you can try and change who you are and do something different to defend Connor McDavid. You have to almost double or triple down into your neutral zone trap, into the 1-3-1. I know some fans really don't like that system and won't like me saying that, but at this point, that's all you can do. You can't try and reinvent the wheel in game now 84. Like, that's not something that's going to lead to success if you try and change what you've been implementing for the last 4 years on this team. I mean, I don't think that's a recipe for success. I think you try and limit what Connor McDavid does because there's no shutting him down. There's only trying to limit him and stay in the box. I mean, we saw in game 1 that improving the penalty kill didn't really change the fact that that power play is going to eat. So the only way to actually combat that power play is to keep them off the ice. And I also think you're 100% right about Connor McDavid maybe understanding that there's a different way to play if this team's going to have success. And I mean, first year in his career, he had over 100 hits. I mean, if you've got the best player in the world throwing the body that often, that's a good sign for a team. So I think he's maybe found a level where very few teams are going to be able to stop him.
Is there anything at all in your mind as far as positives to take away for the Kings from that game 1? Was there anything positive to take away?
Yeah, I actually think Pierre-Luc Dubois had a pretty good game. I mean, he wasn't this dominant force. He wasn't a guy that just completely took over the bottom 6 matchup like I think a lot of fans were hoping for, but I think he had a positive game. I think he was one of the Kings' best forwards, which in a game like that, you know, isn't a amazing accomplishment. I don't think, again, like I said, I don't think they played anywhere near their best game, but I think it's the kind of game that if he can have that across 5, 6, 7 games, however long the series goes, he'll have a pretty good series for them. And I know some people are listening to that saying, well, the guy makes $8.5 million. He needs to be better than pretty good. But I was pleased with his game. I thought he played played better than we've seen him play in a lot of games this season. So that would probably be the big positive for me. Outside of that, there wasn't a lot to love from that game, to be completely honest with you. I mean, I think the Kings came out second best. Cam Talbot was okay. I thought he was actually pretty good at times. I think that obviously the Henrique goal he probably would have wanted back. Outside of that, I didn't think any were really bad goals on his part. I think if they can limit the power play chances, limit those high danger chances from Zach Hyman in around the net, I think he showed enough despite that he could, have a good game.
Well, we will talk a little bit more about Cam Talbot coming up next. Talk about game 2 coming up tonight. Will there be any lineup changes? And we'll talk about in net as well. We'll do that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Drive passion and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. It's a busy time here in LA. Kings, Lakers, Clippers, all in the playoffs. Dodgers come in as the favorites to win it all. And how about the NFL draft on Thursday? USC quarterback Caleb Williams, maybe going number one overall to the Chicago Bears. You can bet on that too. It's a great time of the year to be a sports fan, and you can be even better and more fun with FanDuel. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, we welcome back Austin Stanovich from the Hockey News, and we are going to talk a little bit about Game 2 coming up tonight. And Austin, obviously, one loss is just one loss. As Kevin Fiala said, no one goes 16-0. And as we know as Kings fans, we won Game 1 the last 2 postseasons, and we didn't win the series. So you don't want to make it bigger than it is. That said, to me, it wasn't that the Kings lost. It was how they lost. So interesting for the Kings going forward. And you mentioned it. It's, at this point, it's game 83. Is it realistic to look at strategy changes or approaches as far as how the Kings go into tonight? Or is it just, that was one game, stay the course, do what we do well, and we'll be okay?
Yeah, I don't think there's any possibility for a system change getting implemented right now into that working form. I think you have to, I think you almost, again, I think you have to commit. I don't think they got into their 1-3-1 quite enough. Like I said, part of that's because they go down early, and then you can't really spend a game where you're chasing a lead playing the 1-3-1 for 50 minutes. That's not really going to be a recipe for success or getting back into a game, even though we did see the Kings do that quite a bit in the last series against Edmonton last year, which did not work out well for them. So no, I don't think you're looking at any kind of change of your identity or your system or anything like that. It's you have to come in and play your game. You have to be the best version of yourself. You can't try and pretend. This Kings team can't try and pretend to be something they're not. They have to be who they are, and they have to try to be the best version of who they are.
Well, it looks like, according to what we saw or what we reportedly, what was reported on as far as the morning skate, that the Kings are going to stick with that 12-6 setup. Other than goalie, which we'll talk about in a second, any lineup changes in your mind the Kings might have been looking to make as far as shuffling things up? I know that on the official, list that they had for the lines, they had P.L. Dubois and Byfield and Fiala were officially kind of listed as the fourth line, and Lizotte and company on the third line. They've apparently, judging by what they did in the skate this morning, that's maybe flip-flop, but I think in minutes played, that's the way it was going anyway. So was there anything at all as far as lineup changes in your mind, or is this, again, just stick with what you've got and just do it a lot better?
Yeah, I think, as Rob Blake said time and time again, this is the team they have, this is the team they built. I think that you're not going to try and mix and match too much from those kind of 12-6 we expected, with the exception of obviously Alex Laferriere's coming in, kind of taking that spot out of training camp. So he's the one guy we maybe didn't expect in October to be playing on the first line into this deep into the season. But I don't think there is a line change you're going to make that's really going to make a huge difference for this team. I think that we will probably see what we saw in game 1, and that is Quentin Byfield moving back up onto the first line at different times, kind of seeing him move around a little bit. Jim Hiller's like to use him to kind of plug holes, and he's taking advantage of the youthful legs he has to really keep going and eat up a lot of ice time. So that is one thing I think to look for, is that he's probably going to jump around the lineup a little bit again. And yeah, I think that Dubois, Fiala, Byfield line is going to be the difference maker in this series, because I don't think the Kings' top 2 lines are going to outplay Edmonton's top 2 lines. You're hoping that they can kind of match those 2 lines. They can, again, like I said, you're not going to shut those 2 lines down, but they can kind of, deal with them in any way they can. And then you need that line to really be a dominant line that can flip the series for you. So I think seeing them try and develop some more chemistry and really take advantage of their matchup is going to be key for this team. So they're probably the line I look to the most in this game.
I know we've seen in the past, and we saw it in game one, trying to get Philip Deneau out there against Connor McDavid, Mikey Anderson, sometimes matching up against him as well. But they were both on the ice for a lot of the times when McDavid was doing what he was doing. So I assume they're going to just try and stick with that and hope to have a better result as well.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, Andrei Kopitar is still one of the best shutdown centers in the world. I would be a little concerned about him spending too much time against Connor McDavid just because of McDavid's speed. And I think Deneau, he's not the fastest guy ever, but he gets around well. He's definitely faster than Kopitar is, and we've seen Deneau handle these kind of matchups before and handle them well. I think in that aspect, maybe game one was a little more of a fluke. Maybe not what we're going to see for the rest of the series of that line in particular, just getting worked over by McDavid and his line. So I think they are going to go back to Deneau. He's a guy that's been there. He's done that. He's not someone I think is going to let that impact the rest of the series for him. He's not going to kind of fall into himself and become a lesser version of who he is. I think he'll bounce back with a strong game. So I'd expect him to definitely still take on that matchup and still do relatively well. And the biggest thing too, when we're talking about center matchups, Kings players talk about this a lot. You have to defend Connor McDavid as a 5-man unit. It's not just about can Phil Deneau, shut him down or whatever it is. That needs to be the entire 5-man unit working together. So it needs to be Trevor Moore and Victor Arvidsson on the wings helping out, whoever the deep pairing is, whether it's Gavrikov and Roy or Anderson and Doughty. Like it has to be about more than one guy trying to shut him down, because that's not how it works.
And we touched on this already, but I know some fans were already clamoring, and fans being fans, but talking about making a goalie change after game one. And yes, Cam Talbot did give up 6 goals, but as you mentioned, and I agree with you, hard to blame him on a lot of those goals, especially backdoor tap-ins on the power play. What's he supposed to do about that? A lot of poor defense, but I said they shouldn't make a goalie change. They haven't, by all accounts. It's going to be Cam Talbot again. Do you see, though, maybe going forward, if the Kings don't win, even if Cam Talbot isn't to blame, that maybe they look to switch things up coming up for game number 3? Or obviously, if Talbot gets the job done, then you certainly are going to make a change. But is that an option you think that we could see in the near future?
Yeah, I think so. I 100% agree with you that going back to Talbot for game 2 is the right choice. I mentioned it earlier. I don't think he was really to blame for the 6 goals that got put up against him. I thought in certain aspects, especially earlier in the game, he made a lot of big saves that kind of kept the Kings in it for a little bit, and then obviously it kind of got out of hand for him. But I do think if Edmonton puts up 7 again, you got to change something. I mean, it would be kind of like firing Todd McClellan to try and get things going, right? It's not necessarily this guy's fault, but you have to do something, and it's a lot easier to change your goalie out, especially when you have David Riddick, who has played pretty well for this team, than it is to throw your lines completely in the blender. So if they get lit up for 7 goals again, especially if they lose that game, I wouldn't be shocked to see David Riddick start game 3, but I definitely like Jim Hiller showing that faith in Cam Talbot, who's been their go-to guy all season. I think that was the right call.
Well, hopefully it won't come to that. Hopefully we see Talbot play better. The team plays better. We get the split, and then obviously it's Talbot in game 3. Is there 1 or 2 things, though, specifically about tonight in game 2 that the Kings need to do better from game 1? Is there maybe a couple of things that stand out over the other things?
Yeah, I think going back to not taking penalties. Like, you just cannot let that power play get on the ice. It's obviously unrealistic to expect 0 penalties in any game, but if they can limit that to 1 or 2, that's going to be huge. And I think the biggest thing for me is they have to outwork the Edmonton Oilers tonight. And that's not working hard. They have to outwork them. They have to be the harder working team, because they don't have a skill advantage against Edmonton. They are not as skilled a team. I don't think that's disrespectful to say, right? Edmonton has the best player in the world, probably a top 5 player in the world in Leon Draisaitl. You've got 50 goals at Kaiman. You got Evan Bouchard. Like, this is an incredibly skilled team. So the only way you're going to beat this team is to outwork them, to win every puck battle, to win every battle along the boards. Like, that's how this Kings team is going to have to win games. That's how they're going to have to be, like I mentioned earlier, the best version of themselves. So that's the biggest key for me, is the intensity from the opening puck drop. They have to be the more intense, harder working team. And if they can do that, that's going to give them the best chance to win. And if they don't, and you're trying to get into this battle of who's going to be able to outskill the other team, you're going to lose that to the Edmonton Oilers 9 times out of 10.
Well, like I said, we're keeping the faith. This is only one game, but tonight's obviously
Yeah.
a big game. But I do want to touch on a few things involving the future of the Kings, maybe the near future after this season. We'll do that more here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. LA Kings look to win big this year and capture a third Stanley Cup title, but you could win big playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick a player or players and predict if they will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. And it's not just about the NHL. You can play daily fantasy with the NBA as well. To win 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me right, Kings fans? You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention, nail your picks, and you can start winning big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availabilities. And when you are drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could handpick the best stats for your business team? If you're building a business and you want a talented roster, you need Indeed. Indeed's the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Indeed does the hard hiring work for you. With Indeed, you can start hiring fast, sponsor a job, and they'll match you with quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed fit your job description right when you post. Join fast. Indeed knows that when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon, Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. You need to hire? Then you need Indeed. Well, the LA Kings face the Edmonton Oilers game 2 of their first-round playoff series tonight, 7 p.m. Pacific time. Catch every moment of the hometown broadcast of your LA Kings with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search LA Kings. Wrapping things up with Austin Stanovich, who covers the LA Kings for the Hockey News. And Austin, I'm not sure how most fans feel about seeing the Kings and Oilers play each other for a third straight time. I think some of them probably have some fatigue with that. I know the NHL switched to this format specifically to foster those division rivalries. However, I can understand some people being like, "Oh, again, we're going to see this again."
Yeah.
Maybe we'd all feel differently if they had split the first 2 games. But are you a fan of this current setup, or would you like to see a return to that 1-8 setup we used to have, where I think the Kings would have played Winnipeg in the first round into that one?
Yeah, I've always been a bigger fan of the 1-8. I mean, that to me, that was an example of changing something that wasn't broken, right? Like they had something that worked perfectly that I thought was great, and they just messed with it for no reason. I understand the reasoning. I get that they wanted to have more of those divisional rivalries and all that, but I don't think there was any need for it. And I do think we even seen in the East the last couple of years, like when you get that, especially that 2 versus 3 matchup in each division, like you end up with a couple kind of juggernauts going up against each other in the first round and knocking each other out, which I don't think is great for the playoffs personally. Like I do like that 1-8 format where you maybe get that. I think you maybe see these teams when they play each other in the second round in a better spot and playing their game better, right? Like you get that first round out where they can really find their game in the playoffs, where you maybe don't get that with this current setup. So I do prefer that 1-8 setup, definitely.
Just looking ahead though for the LA Kings, and like I said, we're not throwing the towel in yet on this season or this postseason. But depending on how far they go, we'd love to have you back if they advance and talk about a second round matchup. But if they don't, let's just assume for a moment that it is a third straight year of not getting out of the first round. Yeah. Will the Kings move on from GM Rob Blake for next season?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, a question in a lot of people's minds. I think around the time that they let go of Todd McClellan, that question started popping up. Really, the way I've said it to people is I think we're going to find out if that happens. If they do lose to Edmonton, as you made the point rightfully, that we're only 1 game in, so that's not a foregone conclusion. But if that does happen, I think we're going to find out a lot about how invested ownership is into this team. Because an ownership group that's very invested, that's very concerned with the way forward for this team, would at the very least be very very open to the idea of moving on from your GM. Like, just you look at the moves that have been made these last couple of years with the idea to move this team forward, and they have not moved forward. A lot of people look at the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade. It's not just that one, but without a doubt, that trade, is playing heavy on everyone's mind. And I think that is the kind of big swing that when it doesn't work out, puts the GM's job at risk. And, it certainly has not worked out to this point. And without a big playoff series from him, it will not have worked out from 1 year. So again, I think from where I'm sitting, especially if things don't turn around, not just losing games, but how they're losing these games in round one, I think you almost have to move on from Rob Blake. But again, we will find out how invested ownership is into this team if that happens, and if they're willing to actually make that move and step in and say, hey, we need to move into a different direction. And that's the most interesting thing for me. I mean, if the Kings lose this round one series, I think they're going to be the most interesting team in hockey over the summer, because Rob Blake probably should be out, like I said. And if they move on from Rob Blake, they're probably moving on from Jim Hiller as an interim coach, let a new GM come in and bring his own guy in. And then that just, the landscape of this team could change so drastically if that one decision is made on Rob Blake. So definitely very interesting thing moving forward. I think.
Yeah, no doubt. No, I was agreeing with you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that if they get swept, without a doubt, Rob Blake will be gone. That I do think.
Yeah. You mentioned Todd McClellan. He did a recent interview I know that you reacted to. And by the way, for people that don't know, the Sharks fired their coach today. And I wouldn't be shocked if they rehired Todd McClellan, who's their all-time winningest coach. Buffalo just did it with Lindy Ruff. So keep an eye out on that. We could see Todd McClellan back in the division again. But in the interview that Todd McClellan did, he was asked about Pierre-Luc Dubois. And he had some pretty positive things to say about him. And I know some will say, well, what is he supposed to say? But I thought he was pretty sincere. I know I've been asked repeatedly about Pierre-Luc Dubois and a potential buyout or a trade. And I know that we don't know what's going to be the future. If there's a new GM, who knows what he wants to do. But do you think I guess the question would be, what are the chances you think the Kings would look to try and move on from Pierre-Luc Dubois with a trade or a buyout?
Yeah, I think first of all, it would have to come with a new GM. I don't think there's any world where Rob Blake, a year after making that move, buys out or looks to trade Pierre-Luc Dubois. So if a new GM comes in, then it starts to become a possibility. I just still have a very hard time seeing the team do that this summer. I get why it makes sense. I think there's a lot of logic behind it. The buyout's going to be significantly cheaper this summer if they do decide to go in that direction. His no movement clause doesn't kick in until I think July or June 1st, whenever the next season technically starts for the NHL. So you can move him without him having to approve anything. Obviously, you'd have to take on some cap because no one's taking him at $8.5 million. It's so hard without knowing who that next GM and really who that next coach is, because that's going to be a big determining factor. But I still just have a hard time seeing the team move on from Pierre-Luc Dubois this summer. That being said, that decision has to be made this summer. I mean, they have to either decide to stick with Pierre-Luc Dubois, and I've said this a few times on a few different mediums, but like if they do decide we're going to keep Pierre-Luc Dubois and persist with him, they have to commit to Pierre-Luc Dubois. He cannot spend the rest of his career in LA being a third line center, them trying to use him in a matchup scenario to shut down. Like, that's not how you're going to get the most out of Pierre-Luc Dubois. So if they don't buy him out or trade him, you have to commit to him, or just decide, hey, this hasn't worked out. We're just going to break this off now after year one. We're going to either eat the buyout or trade him at whatever, $2-3 million retain. I don't want to say it's impossible. Again, a new GM could really want to make that, restructure how this team is built. I just find it very hard I can't think of a single time a team has made that kind of move where they, after 1 year, just completely cut bait with a guy they gave up so much to get and are paying so much. So I just have a hard time seeing that happening this summer.
Yeah, I agree. He is Austin Stanovich. Austin, very much appreciate your time. You guys should follow him on X or Twitter at Austin, AUSTIN, Stanovich, STANOVICH, and don't forget 68 at the end. Check out his work at the Hockey News, thehockeynews.com. Again, thanks, Austin, for doing this. Looking forward to seeing you out there for Game 3 at Crypto.com Arena. Hopefully we have some more opportunities to talk to you about the Kings playing hockey, but as always, appreciate your time and thanks for doing this.
Yeah, like I always say, it's always a blast coming on here. I'll come on anytime.
And we always appreciate that. Thanks, Austin. We'll talk to you soon. All right, guys. We thank Austin Stanovich for joining us. For you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, Thursday, of course, we'll have a deep dive and a recap of game number 2. And then on Friday, we'll look ahead to game 3 and have another Kings fan feedback show. If you want to get in on that with an email, it's lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And as always, you can leave your comments in the comments section on the YouTube episodes as well. Love you to stay interactive with us on X, Twitter, and Instagram. We're at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. Hopefully we see a win in game number 2. We'll talk to you on Thursday. And as always, go Kings, go.